Hey everybody, this is David with OptionAvenue, and today we have Mark Piggott. He's going to talk about his book Corsair and the Sky Pirates. Hey Mark, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How about you, David?
Hey, good. Thanks for being on here. So let's just jump right in. Can you give us a brief summary of your book?
Well, imagine if Nikola Tesla and Jules Verne met each other and they collaborated together. What would the world have been like out of that collaboration? And that's where I begin the story of Corsair and the Sky Pirates. That collaboration led to a new industrial revolution, a steampunk revolution, as I like to call it, and brought new technologies early. And so you have in the early 1900s a world of just incredible but steam-driven technology based around an element that was fell from the stars, pieces of a comet called Uriel, that it basically provides uh, steam power, but doesn't fade away. So it's like it provides in engines, it can provide a constant flow of steam.
Okay.
And that technology then leads to all these advances, but at the same time, it does lead to the creation of sky pirates using their airships to intercept other airships and pull off great heists. But the thing is that the sky pirates actually work for Tesla in his war with Thomas Edison, because Edison is looking for corporate expansion while Tesla with this new technology, while Tesla wants to make it open and free for the people. So it's a
Hmm,
fight between the two geniuses of that time period.
cool. Got it. Are those the main characters then? So,
They're not they're The main characters. The main story revolves around Corsair, which is what I like to say is I combine actual historical figures with characters of my own creation within this story. And most of the story revolves around one of Tesla's many pirate crews, and one of them, of course, this main one is Corsair.
okay.
Corsair is a bit of an enigma himself. Not much is known about him, just that he's, very eccentric and also, dashing for a bit of a pirate, but also one of those people that was willing to give back and help others in need through his pirating, more or less. And his crew is a diverse conglomerate of different kinds of people, from the African American engineer, who he is a Vernian, which is a term I use as people who study the works of Jules Verne and puts them into practical engineering aspects. So
Hmm.
he's his chief, and Bronx is his chief engineer. He has Kiki as first officer. She's half Japanese, half British, and she is an outcast basically in both sides. But she tries to find that peace within herself through her being with Corsair, of course.
And the
The
main story is around Corsair in this group.
Yes, yeah,
And then
absolutely.
you have Tesla and Edison variations of them in the story.
Yes, Edison basically in my story, he's joined up with other great, powerful thinkers of that time, Rodigan, and Parsons, and other these other inventors, and has formed a conglomerate group called ERP. And this corporation, he's trying to basically just control things around the world through this corporation. And of course, this is what Tesla is fighting against.
And you mentioned Jules Verne. So is he a character in it, or is it the style of?
He's basically mentioned in the beginning, but by the 1900s he did pass away. So I'm trying to keep with some historical aspects of that. But he was the inspiration with Tesla. And the interesting thing to note is that in my research for this writing this book is that Tesla and Verne were actually in France at the same time. In 1883, Tesla was working for Continental Edison in Paris. And of course, Verne was living in France at that time. So in all likelihood, they could have met.
Hmm, cool. Interesting. All right. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I've always been a big fan of steampunk. It's just that the genre is just so interesting, to taking modern technology to that Victorian era, and of course the different devices that you see created through the steampunk genre. It's just interesting to try to figure these things out. And again, part of my research was that, when you think about one of the things in my story is like a Hollerith thinking machine, which is an early version of computer. And that was actually, there was a gentleman named Hollerith who invented one of the first data coalescing machines, an early computer, if you wanted to call it. So
Mhm.
I just took it a little bit further with, with the steampunk technology, but it's just a fun concept trying to do this. And then, of course, combining pirates, that's always a fun thing to throw in there.
Yeah, of course. Sky Pirates. Uh,
Hmm.
okay, cool. So the main characters then are Corsair. You mentioned some other ones, but why don't you break down what drives that character? You said he's kind of a mystery, but what drives him, and is he the main protagonist?
He is the main protagonist, and I think again, Corsair, he is a bit of a mystery. He has a secret, which when you get to the end of the book, you do find what that secret is, but he does have a bit of a secret of his own. And he's not only protecting that secret, but he's also protecting his crew. He looks out for them like a family. And he's just looking out for people in the world, the downtrodden, the people left behind by, and a lot of my book, I try to touch on common subjects of even today: corporate greed, climate change, racism, and these things that we have today, and put them in that era, and just try to reach out and make note of them, and try to show that kind of thing we can do to correct it.
Mhm. Are you willing to tell us what the big reveal is?
No, 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 no. You got to get to the end of the book for that. I can't. I don't want to spoil it.
All right. Okay, so what are some of the themes that you explore? You mentioned a couple of them now, so some real life ones.
Well, like I
What's the
said,
what would be the
I
main
I
theme?
think I think a good one is racism, because you see that so much today, and we have to be able to just ignore that. But when especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we were a very, society that was against African Americans, against Asians, against other cultures. There was broad racism, and I just trying to touch in, not only, it's like, poking the bear, making fun of it, but at the same time showing the reality of the situation. I mean, I have a whole scene in the book that takes place in Harlem, where you have an Irish gangster kind of guy. That's Duke. He's one of the Tesla's, not Tesla, excuse me, Edison's strong men, his head of security. He goes into Harlem looking for Corsair and his crew, because the Corsair's engineer, Bronx, he's lives there. His mother lives there. And so you've got a whole neighborhood against, an Irish mob. And in that era, that was really tense. So putting it into words and showing that, and trying to not make light of it, but trying to show the idiocy of racism. I always like, that was the one thing, when you think about someone like Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles, he was, people think his movie is racist, but it's not. It's showing how ugly and how stupid racism is. And I'm trying to do that a little bit with my book as well, because most of the crew, I mean, I have an African American engineer, the half Asian first officer, I have a Native American Apache is one of the characters. The pilot of the ship, Eager, who is basically a father figure to Corsair, he's Aboriginal and blind.
Mm,
So, I tried to have a real diverse crew, but at the same time, showing that they can come together, and how we all can come together like them.
right, nice. And then the setting, how does that enhance the story?
I'm sorry, you kind of,
The
uh,
setting,
the setting.
yeah, where it all takes place, or
Well, I
where
mean,
Bramante is, right?
most of it is on the ship, the Corsair ship, the Gallaroo. The Gallaroo is actually, just to explain the name of it. The Gallaroo is named after an Aboriginal serpent from the creation myths of the Aboriginal people. So
Okay.
it was this, the rainbow serpent of the skies, and so that's kind of where. And Corsair, the one thing we do know about him, he's from Australia with Eager. He grew up there with Eager. So it's kind of a thing with him that bringing that culture aspect as well into the story. And again, it all takes place on the Gallaroo, but of course, the Gallaroo is an airship. So they fly to Egypt. They fly across the English Channel. They're flying to Odysseus Station, which is Tesla's home base, a floating city in the sky above the Iceland, using the power of the volcano to help keep power their his floating city there, and of course across the United States and into the American Southwest. So we're traveling all over the world with this story.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of the research you did. So what is it that you researched to put in the book?
Well, first off, I wanted with the characters, I wanted that mix of actual historical figures with my own characters. Some of the sky pirates, for example, Pancho Villa, the Mexican bandit. In my story, he gives up his, you know, runs across the border between Mexico and the United States and takes to the skies as a sky pirate. I have Sam Cody, who was, an aviation
Mm,
genius at the time, and have him become one of the sky pirates. He hawked on the Cody name of people thinking he was like along the lines of Buffalo Bill, but he used that, calling himself Colonel Sam Cody, and he pioneered a lot of aviation. And so he's one of my sky pirates. And then one of the most interesting ones in my story is Bessie Coleman, who I never heard of before until I started researching this. Here is a woman who is the daughter of a sharecropper who when she saw flight, said, I want to learn how to do that. And she traveled to France and learned how to fly. She became an aviator before Amelia Earhart, but because she was African American, that wasn't taught in schools, and that's a shame because she is such an interesting character. And having her as one of my sky pirates in this was just, to me, I just needed to bring that story to life.
very cool. So you're taking a lot of real life historical characters and then just giving them the Sky Pirate twist.
That, and also in other things, like for example, in my story, there are what we call shades. Shades are the spies of this time period, and Corsair has a shade, the Scarlet Fox that works for him, former British spy, as it were, for MI6. And then Edison's is Mata Hari, the infamous spy, and she works out of the Moulin Rouge in Paris. So I'm again trying to mix that historical figures with actual ones
Hmm.
with my characters.
Yeah, no, I like it. What are some of the key scenes in your book that you think would be crucial for adaptation?
Well, I mean, it opens with a heist over the English Channel, where, of course, the Gallaroo comes in on a White Star airline using the White Star name, but kind of infamous for Titanic. But I mean, I was using them because airships are the big way to travel. That's nowadays in this period, in my story, that is. We use a White Star airship, and the first thing Corsair does is zoom in, and this is a heist over the English Channel. That's a great, opening scene to me. It's how I got first inspired to write the story, was just that opening scene itself.
That
And
started built off of that.
yeah, yeah. And then, of course, they travel to Egypt to try to find. They're looking through historical references for this comet to try to learn its path and everything. And so they're looking through ancient history. And Corsair then goes to Egypt, and they have a professor there they meet up with to try to, who's looking at ancient, hieroglyphics, and is able to see where it was during that time period, where the comet passed by the Earth. And so
Hmm.
they're able to track it better. And then they go to the American Southwest. They meet up with Geronimo, and because into the ancient cave, there's an ancient cave in the in the reservation where they have drawings again of the comet and trying to source it out and things. And there's even a piece down there, a piece of the comet, a large piece they call the gift of Usin, because to the Apache, Usin was God, and this was a gift for the Apache to protect them, so they protect it.
Hmm. Cool. I like it. Let's say, let's switch gears just a little bit and break
Mhm.
down you actually making the book. So the book came out in 2023.
Yes.
Okay. And then how long did you work on it?
Oh, I worked on it for at least it again, it started that opening scene, that opening heist scene was actually a short story I first wrote for a steampunks short story contest.
Oh,
And
cool.
then I wrote that, and then it was like, there's more here. And then I expanded it into the book. So it took me about 3 years. It was, I think, right before the beginning of the pandemic when, I had a lot of free time on my hand.
Yeah.
I started really working on it in earnest.
So the short story though, that was in 2020.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And then
And
I
then,
developed it further into the entire book and everything. And then when I signed with my current publisher, Curious Corvid Publishing out of Geneva, Ohio, when I signed with them for another book of mine originally, and then my second book to come out from them was Corsair.
mhm, mhm. Okay, so is this one in a series of books?
Well,
Or
I can honestly say I'm working
I
on the
might have lost
sequel
you. Can you
right
hear me okay?
now. Yeah, I can hear you. It was a little in and out there a
Okay,
second, but
so
I got you.
okay, the sequel is called,
The sequel is called
yeah, is
Corsair
called Corsair.
and Corsair and the Temple of the Heavenly Chariot. And I'm currently in process of writing that right now.
When do you think that'll be done?
I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the year and then looking for about another year of editing or so. And then maybe by 2025 or 2020, end of 2025, early 2026, I might have it out.
Nice. Okay, cool. What are some of the authors or books that influenced your writing for this?
Well, I mean, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells are considered the godfathers of steampunk. When you read their works, it's take how they were able to conceive and imagine modern technology as they did. It's just amazing. And their works have always been my biggest inspiration for things like this. But I can also honestly say, writing as a whole, Michael Moorcock was one of my bigger influences. He wrote the Elric of Melniboné series. It's a fantasy series, but it's just his writing was so stylish and so different from everybody else's. It was just that was the one of my biggest influences.
What was that author's name?
Michael Moorcock.
Okay. I've never heard of him. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to read an interesting story, the Elric series is just for it is so beyond regular fantasy stuff. I mean, was really inspiring to me.
And you really like the style of the writing too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what made me think differently as a writer.
Was it hard to write the book?
It was easy once I got the idea going. I think the hardest part is for this was the research because you wanted, especially for I created my own characters. That's one thing, but when you're actually mixing in actual historical figures and time periods and places, that takes a lot of research. I mean, I had to delve into what the Moulin Rouge and the Caves Lascaux, the Luxor ruins in Egypt, all of these different things. I had to, make sure that it was accurate, and then also, again, the characters themselves, Geronimo, Matahari, and others. You just had to make sure that you were at least, you can have some creative leeway, but a lot of it still had to be spot on.
Hmm. Gotcha. And then you've had the book out there for a little bit now. So do you have some memorable feedback you've received from readers?
A lot of it, my most memorable feedback, I think, has just been the fact that they enjoyed the mix of the modern technology and that time period, and also having the different historical characters mixed in as well. That's been what's been great for me is they liked some of the things they saw in that aspect, and I enjoy
Mm.
that.
What was that? I always see it randomly if I'm on TikTok or yeah, sometimes I guess Instagram too late at night. There's a advanced, ancient advanced city or civilization called Tar Turan. What is it called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm afraid I don't. That's a new one to me.
Tartula. They go and they look at the old world fairs and they're like,
Oh yeah.
how did they build all this in one year? and then destroy it all. And then there's people that are saying, oh, there was an advanced civilization. Kind of falls in line with this like steampunk world where a lot of the towers above the churches or whatever the like center of the city was, they have like big copper or brass balls to like harness electricity. And they think there was this whole like society that got wiped out. It kind of falls in line with this.
Well, I mean, you
Yeah,
have you
forgetting
have
what
a
it is.
lot of myths in those areas when you think about Hyperborea, the Atlantis, things like that. That Lemuria. There are so many old cultures and the ancient myths of these cultures that had advanced technology. I mean, just ancient Egypt alone, they still, you're still trying to figure out how they built some of the things there. And then you look at the Incas and the Mayans and some of their structures and things, we've always had that idea. And again, I have a steampunk story, but it does have a bit of a sci-fi element, bringing in this comet and the pieces of it that, are, it's an element that is unknown. I mean, that's I can honestly say is I had one person who was a bit of a science nerd. He basically said, you can't have an element where it expends energy, but it doesn't shrink. And I said, well, it's a new element. It's something we
Right,
don't know about. It's outside. So that's why it's science fiction. So, I mean, I understand people thinking
right.
logically, but when you're writing a story like this, you try to find the science, but at the same time, you can be a little bit creative if it's something outside of our spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tartaria. I just looked it up.
Tartaria. I have
Did
to
you
look.
hear about? You've heard
I've
that?
never heard of it, but I would definitely look
Yeah.
into that. That
There's
sounds
all these
interesting.
also weird conspiracies like linked to all that one, but that's kind of a new one that popped up over the last couple of years. So there's just people that are looking at video or the old photos of these old cities, and they're like, how did they build this with wagons and hammers and so you should look into it. I think you would like that.
I will definitely do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Maybe you could twist that into one of your stories. All right, cool. So, do you think there's any aspect of the book that you might change that you would have changed now that it's been out there for a little while?
I think the main thing when you have such a large cast, as it were, when you think, the crew, the Gallery, you have these are eight plus individuals along with some of the other characters. You don't really have time to delve into their history and who they are. You're trying to provide some little extra eccentricities for each of the
Yeah.
characters to try to show who they are, but you can't really delve into them as much. And I think that what I'm working on with the sequel is just to try to give a little more background to each of these characters and to show them who they are, who they really are.
Okay, cool. And then some comparable films or TV shows,
Well,
some
I
that you
mean,
feel like did a good job with steampunk content.
I mean, the Wild Wild West has always been one of my favorite shows as a kid.
Okay.
And and it has had such a steampunk element to it with the gadgets and things on the train and other stuff. I love that show. So that definitely is comparable. And I think when you look at movies like Hugo, and the Mortal Engines, those have a very steampunk look and feel to them. There's also somebody when I was writing this book and I was talking to a friend of mine, he had said, "Have you ever seen Master of the World?" And I said, "No." And I looked it up and I watched it for the first time. It's an old Vincent Price movie about where he was going to stop world wars by taking over the world, and he had this airship and he flew around. And again, it was very steampunk. It was early steampunk before we even knew the term. But
Hmm.
it's a great classic movie. And when you look at it, say, yeah, that's steampunk.
Yeah. Did you ever see The Illusionist?
Yes, that's all illusionist. And there's the one with Hugh Jackman. I'm trying to remember it.
Yeah, I was just trying to
Uh,
think of it.
yeah, because that included Tesla in that one. In the one with Hugh Jackman, he actually went to Nikola Tesla and to invent a machine for him. And so that was very interesting in its representation of Tesla.
Oh,
Um,
the Prestige?
yes, the Prestige. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because sometimes the steampunk can get like a little silly in comic book, but it's when it takes like more of a serious style and the clothes look a little more beat up and it looks true to the time, like the Illusionist or the Prestige. It looks cool. It's
And
interesting.
also, if you look at if you look at a video game like BioShock, that even though it's considered a bit of a horror video game, the elements in it are very steampunk about this the what they how they did the floating city in the BioShock 2 and the underwater city, in the original BioShock. They're very steampunk in that appearance as well.
Interesting. Cool. Well, then I think that pretty much sums it up on my end. Is there anything you would want to add or why you really think this would be a good, project to take on for a producer?
I think most of all, it's just the historical aspect of it that when you're looking at historical fiction has always been one of my favorite things, and having that opportunity to teach history, but at the same time give it that modern twist that will attract young people to look at it. I mean, that's the one thing I hear at all the book shows I go to when people see my book cover and I start telling them about the story. It's like it just like wows them because the
Hmm.
the idea of Jules Verne and Nikola Tesla, that whole thing, just bringing it all together in with sky pirates. That's always just fun and an interesting aspect. So I just think it's a great combination.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. It does sound fun. Well, thank you, Mark. That's it for me on my end. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.
Yeah, and then congrats on the sequel. Let me know when that comes out.
I definitely will.
All right, cool. Bye.
Bye.